guys, so I made a video before talking about should you switch to a 2020 Civic Si, and this video is going to be similar to that, but it's going to be slightly updated. And it's also, I apologize now, it's going to be all over the place. I have had this car, I've had the 2018 one for 2 years. I've had this one now since March of this year. So I've had it for a decent amount of time. But, and what's now? It's the beginning of July or so. So I've had it from March to July. It's been about 4 months, 3.5 months. And this video focus is going to be a little different than my last one. My last one I talked about key features of the cars that I liked, didn't like, things like that. This one's going to be more of should you own this car in your lifetime. So I've had 2 of these, as I've said. As a beginner, entry-level, fun daily driver, I highly recommend this car. You're not going to be able to get this much car for this price point with any other car company, or any other car for that matter. For under $28,000, you can get a turbocharged, manual, upgradable, daily driving car that's also fun as anything. You could take it to the track if you wanted. Now you're not going to be able to keep up with race cars and things like that, but it's a real fun car. So driving this car every day, you kind of learn what it can handle. You learn what its limitations are. And there's a lot to learn to be a good driver, or to be able to handle a car that's a little higher horsepower and faster. There's so many people, and you hear so many stories about people getting a brand new Corvette, they're on the road, they floor it a little too much and back kicks out and they're into the wall. So having a nice front wheel drive car to start makes driving a ton easier right off the bat, because something is pulling the car, not the wheels pushing the car from the back. So it doesn't really fishtail, it doesn't do anything like that. You really can't drift the back end of this car too easily. Now, I will say one story later on when I talk about one time I took an off-ramp a little too fast. I didn't realize I was supposed to get over, but we'll get into that. So this car, there's not much that I don't like about it. Now, when I first got it, I will say it was a little slower than I expected and a little quieter than I expected. But there's so many ways for cheap that you can change that. And by cheap, I mean in the $700 range. You go to buy a car for a or an exhaust for a BMW M3, and it's going to be a little more expensive than for a little 4-cylinder Honda Civic. So this is a great learning car. It's a great car to teach you about what you want from a car, because there's so many points of this car. Like, for instance, this was the car I learned to drive a manual on. It wasn't this one specifically, it was my 2018. But I learned to drive a manual on that car when I drove it off the lot from the dealership. And from that moment, I was hooked on manuals. Manuals are dying out. A lot of cars aren't coming with manual transmissions. And having a manual, it's a good thing to know how to do. And 2, it's just so much fun to feel connected with the car. You just, now being in traffic kind of sucks a little bit, but you're one with the car most of the time. And so driving a manual is just a ton of fun for me. It adds a whole new excitement factor to driving that an automatic doesn't give me. So my commute to work goes from oh, I gotta drive to work, to I can't wait to get in my car and drive to work. And you can ask my girlfriend, you can ask my friends, like, I always look for an excuse to take my car out, and I'm like, I just get to spend more time in the Honda. I love driving this car. And limitations of this car are easily fixable. So this is going back to the story I was going to start telling you a few minutes ago, where I was on the highway in the left lane. I should have gotten off at an exit and didn't know when the next exit was coming up. So I just stayed in my lane. Well, the last exit for like 10 miles was coming up. Car next to me. So I floored it, passed the car on my right, moved over one lane, was really close to the exit, didn't have time to brake, was doing about 90 miles an hour, and took this car completely sideways on the whole on-ramp. And at no point in time did I feel that I was not in control of the car. Which, as weird as that sounds, at 90 miles an hour when you're sideways, you feel like you wouldn't be in control of the car. But I felt in control. The back had kicked out a little bit. The front was just perfectly fine. And so my slide was more from wheels that aren't drive wheels and aren't steering wheels. They were just the back kicked out a little bit. But I was completely sideways. If I made an adjustment with my steering wheel, the car would turn that direction, and it did. I mean, I went around the whole off-ramp at probably like 65 miles an hour by the time I was off the ramp, which is still pretty fast. I would never take an off-ramp that fast again after that experience. But the car felt planted. I know my Civic EX from 2013 would have been off in a ditch somewhere. It just didn't have the grip that this car has. It didn't have the feel this car has. So I think every person needs to buy this car at least once in their lives. It's a cheap car that you can modify, you can make your own without breaking the bank, you can buy the car or lease the car without breaking the bank. There's just so many options for this platform that make it such a good beginner sports car. And I use the term beginner sports car loosely because I know you guys are going to say in the comments, well, just buy a better car from the start if you want a sports car. Well, that's not what this is about. This is about on a limited budget. It was my first car that was a manual. It was my first car that had, to be honest, my Honda Pilot has over 200 horsepower, but that doesn't really count because it's a giant SUV and you're not going to drive that like a car. So it was my first car over 200 horsepower. I learned to drive it. I drove it for 2 years stock. Next car, wanted a little more. Didn't break the bank. Got a K-tuner. Got an intake for it. And it's a great car still. There's nothing I would really change about the purchase decision I made. I've seen a bunch of other cars that, I mean, even my friend has a Type R. And he spent way too much money on the Type R, like $15,000 more than an SI. And it's not that much more car. Like, driving both of them, the Type R feels a little tighter. It feels a little more developed and defined, but it's meant for the track. It's not meant for a daily driver. So the SI is the perfect daily driver. The clutch is light enough. It's got enough power to do whatever you want it to. It's really just a great car, and I think if you're on the edge about getting a Civic Si, you should really give it a shot. If you're even thinking about it, it's the car for you. If you're giving it the option, just do it. Because you're not going to get this much car at a similar price that includes even all the amenities of backup camera standard, lane keep assist, adaptive cruise control, all those things standard for that price point. So my next car, maybe if I have a little more money, then I'll go for a different car. But if I don't have more money, then I can tell you right now, after owning two SIs that are the same generation SIs, I would own a third one. Hands down. If I don't have the money for a different car, I would definitely buy another SI. There's no other car that I even test drove, even a Veloster N. when I test drove one of those, it just wasn't the car for me. All the features and gadgets were cool, but it really wasn't the car for me. I don't picture myself driving anything but, I don't know, I don't picture myself driving a Kia Stinger, a Hyundai, a Nissan, Toyota. Like, I may be a little biased towards Honda, but I know that after having 20 plus of them in my family, it's going to be a bulletproof car that's going to last a long time, and there's always a model for you, whether it be the Civic, the Accord, the SI, the Type R. There's always going to be a model for you, and I think the model for me is the SI. So let me know what you guys think. Let me know if any of you have made the jump to get an SI recently. I'd love to hear what your guys' stories are. But I'll see you in the next one, guys.